I'm going to open up a new document, and it doesn't really matter the size of the document because it's still in vector, it's scalable, you can make it any size. I just like to stick with standard sizes, and for you that could be European sizes. I'm in the United States, so I'm going to stick with inches. I'm just going to do an 11 by 8.5 inch document. I like to do a horizontal orientation, so 11 by 8.5. Just because I feel like I just work better horizontally than I do vertically. So I'm just going to paste it in here, and here's kind of some basic shapes. This is kind of where our idea pool will come from. A nice pool of different ideas to pick from as we kind of work with our typography. So let's get our type tool, and we're going to type out our name, Malleable. And I'm going to do it first of all in lowercase. Malluable. So there's our basic name. And this is what I love. Working with typography is one of my favorite things to do. So this is lowercase. We are going to make a copy, and we're going to make it all uppercase. And we're going to play around with ideas of lowercase and uppercase, because as we studied in the design theory lessons, uppercase communicates different feelings and emotions than a lowercase. A lowercase is softer, more approachable, modern. Uppercase is strong, strength. So, you know, kind of that goes more toward our brand than the lowercase, but I want to see how both look. So I'm going to go over to my character panel here. It's in my properties. I'm in a newer version of Illustrator, so it's going to be in my properties panel right here in the character, or you can access it right here when you have the type tool selected. And I'm going to make sure, I'm just going to go to character. I'm going to go down to this handy drop down menu, and there's something called all caps. So I can go ahead and click it to all caps. And that's just a quicker way to switch things instead of having to type it all in all caps. You can kind of do it through the character menu. You can also do subscripts and all sorts of extra stuff as well. So here's uppercase, here's lowercase, and we're going to do the same thing we did with symbols. We're going to duplicate and modify, and just create a really wide array of font choices and combinations to see what feels right, what looks right with the accompanying symbols. So this is your default Myriad Pro, and we're going to make this a little bit smaller because we're going to be fitting a lot of different options here. So as I start to duplicate these, if I feel like I definitely want to stick with a lowercase or an uppercase, we can start to eliminate and refine further. But for right now, I'm keeping both available. So I'm going to move over here, and I'm going to cycle through my font choices. And you can, I have my favorite font guide if you're looking for font ideas. You don't have to stick with those, but just some that I like to stick with. And so as I'm cycling through these, you're kind of seeing serifs, sans serifs. In the newer versions of Adobe Illustrator, you can arrange it by going up to filters, and you can arrange it by classification. So if I want to stick with sans serif, I'm pretty sure I want a sans serif typeface, then you can categorize it, and all of these will be sans serif, which is really, really nice. So Avenir is one I've used a lot in branding projects, so I'm going to check it out. And we want to be careful not to do something too thin in weight. For the same reason we don't want to have strokes in our logo symbol that's too thin. So right now this ultra light is way too thin. When I zoom out, you totally lose it. And I have a lot of students struggle with making typography in lines a little bit too thin. When you get it printed, there could be some readability problems. So instead of ultra light, let's kind of move through these weight choices and see what works really well. There's really a heavy, which I think might be a little too chunky. So let's stick with something right here in the middle, perhaps a demi-bold. Just an idea of seeing how that looks. We can go ahead and eliminate our default because I don't think we want to have Myriad Pro as our choice. So one thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to, instead of black, I'm just kind of double clicking on my swatch and just making it a light gray. I feel that it really helps me put color in my mind, even though I'm not actually using color, I'm sticking with black and white. It just kind of helps me add more color because pure black is so strong. So just doing a light gray here. So let's duplicate and let's make this a little bit faster of a process. So I'm going to go through real quickly and pick out what typefaces I think could work. Oh, that's an interesting one, but maybe a little bit too playful. So I'm thinking about the brand as I'm doing a type choice. That is Bebas New Regular. and it's condensed, meaning the typography is really, really close together. And I feel like that is, it's really strong. There's not a lot of spacing between the characters. I don't know. I just don't like the way that is feeling right now. I need something a little more dynamic and softer. And so you have something like this, Maku. So this is kind of those little decorative typefaces, almost like a script, but it's more handwritten in nature. And that has a very casual, youthful look, but that's not really going with our brand, is it? Our brand is high-end clientele, coaching, successful people, strength. So you can tell already that that typeface is just not vibing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch now to serif typefaces and see if a more traditional serif typeface could be stronger. That looks really good. It's kind of like a Dido high contrast sans serif, serif typeface, because there's higher contrast between the letters. So this is a really thick stroke and this is a really thin stroke. So there's high contrast between all of these. It gives it a really nice, elegant, traditional look. So let's keep that and make a duplicate and move on to the next typeface. So we're going to try that one. And that one was a Brill fat face, which is a really common one I tend to use. And you could pick one. This one, Georgia. They're both sans serifs, but you notice this one has little contrast between the strokes. They all a little bit more even stroke throughout the entire letter, and it gives it a totally different look. I think it makes it more readable. And I'm kind of feeling this one more because you don't have that high contrast. I think it makes it easier, chunkier. It just kind of feels a little more modern. And I'm not liking how the all uppercase is looking over here. So we're just discovering things as we make duplicates and test out different typeface choices. Marion, that's one. Oh, there's regular, italic. Don't like how the italic works, bold. So there's not a huge difference between this one, which is Marion, and this one, which is Georgia. They're both very traditional typefaces. You can always pair them together to see how they are slightly different when you get to the ball terminal here on the A and the ball terminal here. They're just treated a little bit differently, just little different style things. You notice how this is a little bit more flat and this is has a little bit more of an angle. So, study each type choice and just see what characteristics you think would work really, really good with your font choice. And in some cases, you may develop your own custom typeface by getting them. I do that in other classes like my Logo Design Mastery course or my intermediate course, where I take a typeface and we create outlines and we literally change the shape of the type to make it unique and totally custom. But once again, that's a little bit more of an intermediate skill. So Dido is a very, very popular typeface to use with high-end magazines. And once again, high-end was a word we used in the client brief. So I'm going to just keep that in there. And let's filter things out. Let's try a slab serif. It's going to be chunky. It's going to have a lot more characteristics, but those characteristics could easily overpower our symbol. So we're going to have a symbol in this logo. So if we have a symbol and we have a very highly characteristic stylized typeface like this with lots of slab chunky serifs, it starts to compete with the symbol. So we want to go for simplicity. We don't want the symbol to be overwhelmed by the typeface, and we don't want the typeface to be overwhelmed by the symbol. So slab serifs, they might be too decorative in nature for this. We're wanting something more simple. So just kind of realizing that as I kind of go through the list here. So let's go through our filter. We have script typefaces. Once again, I think in this case, if we have kind of a really cool decorative symbol along with the logo, that a script typeface might be a little much. So we're going to skip past some of these, and I'm going to just go back, and I'm going to go back to a sans serif and see if there's not another choice here that I can go through. And I have Adobe fonts, because I have the Adobe subscription, and that gives me access to a lot of these. There's also Google Fonts, googlefonts.com. You can find a bunch of free fonts to use there as well, and this has a mix of both of those. So Roboto, that's a pretty popular one to use for UX design or online websites. I know that they tend to love to use Roboto. Let me see if I can't try a lighter weight, just to kind of throw in a sans serif. So we have a lot of good choices here, a lot of good combination of lowercase and uppercase. I'm going to spend, 20 more minutes or so kind of trying out more. I would have you along with me, but I definitely don't want to get you bored. Just kind of doing the same thing I just did in the last 20 minutes, but just doing a little bit further to make sure I go through all the font choices and find the perfect font.